Is Gil useless in Final Fantasy XIV? No, but it wasn't always this way. Hello everyone, my name is Edrem, animatronic puppet VTuber and content enjoyer, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about this saying that I keep hearing people talk about, right? They go, Gil is useless in FF14. And it actually hasn't been that way for a while now. But these kind of things get spread around, people kind of repeat it over time, and it just becomes the accepted thing. The game has done a lot to make Gil more useful. First, I want to unwrap things a little bit and talk about Gil and gold and money in games from a more game design perspective, right? Because 14's probably biggest comparison for a lot of people, probably a lot of people would understand this, is World of Warcraft, right? And they have gold in WoW. And in WoW, there is a huge amount of inflation with the economy. Gets worse and goes up and down. WoW tends to use more like gold sinks to try and get rid of money in the economy. Doesn't quite work. There's a lot of things going on there. In fact, there's actually a really kind of famous case on one specific server called Alexstrasza, right? You can you actually look that up. If you look up Alexstrasza inflation, you'll find some info about that. But I want to kind of talk about like what Final Fantasy does differently to WoW to manage the Gil and how it's making it more useful now. So let's just talk kind of briefly. There's three things from a game design perspective that you do with a money, a currency in a game, right? Call them source. That's any time we just generate Gil, right? That's just, we just generate it out of nothing. That Gil did not previously exist. We source it and give it to a player. That's if you do things like quest rewards, right? That's if you do things like leave quests. If you sell things to a vendor, that's sourcing Gil. And there's also transfer. This is the one that we want the most of, because that's kind of the point of Gil. This is when one player transfers Gil to another player. Clearest example, easiest thing to say, market board, right? The market board is the way to transfer Gil or currency from player to player. In WoW, it's the auction house. And then, finally, there's drain. So if we only had source and transfer, eventually we just keep adding more and more and more and more to the economy, right? The global player economy over time, and it would devalue it. That's what the inflation is. So we need some way to drain it out of the economy as well. And the most direct way you can kind of think about that is like, oh, that's like teleportation costs. You teleport, you instantly just lose up to like 1500 Gil now. But there's also a lot of other things. Technically stuff like using pots, using food, repairing gear. There's all kinds of things that's like, well, if you're taking something out, if you're using something up that costs you Gil at some point, that is technically draining it out, right? That's just taking Gil out of the economy. So here's the interesting thing that 14 does to manage this. Everything that is sourced is actually really, really limited, right? You can do the MSQ, and the MSQ gives you a fair bit of Gil, but you can only do it once on the one character. And it's not that much Gil that it's worth making an alt character to do it again. Same with all the side quests. Like they give you a fair bit, but you got to do it a lot over time. So it's not really something that people would want to grind out. Now, selling items to vendors is almost never worth it. It's almost always better to just put it on the market board, unless it's something really, really kind of terrible. In which case, the vendor's just not going to give you much for it either. So farming mobs for drops and things is not going to work all that well. There are a lot of interesting sources, though, that do give you Gil. But here's the thing. They are all time-locked, right? They're all time-locked. So one of the big ones is maps. Maps are a big, big source of Gil. But they are time-locked so that a player character can only get one map, I believe, every 18 hours? I know it's less than a day. But they've got a lockout on, right? You can't get them too much, which is why the supply and demand for maps always changes, but there's always somewhat pricey, especially when Gatherer can only get one kind of map in that 18-hour span. There are, and a lot of people are not going to like this, submarines in an FC. They are still somewhat time locked. You send them out, they go and do their mission. They are a really, really good source of Gil, and I do think that needs to change. But they are still time locked. All right. So the game kind of trickles Gil into the economy over time. That's relatively controllable. And that makes that so that the economy doesn't get super inflated with the amount of Gil that's coming in. Now, there was a little funny thing in the past of this with leave quests. When was the last time any of you done a leave quest? I mean, maybe if you're leveling a crafter or gatherer, but they're always there. They are technically time locked as well because you get a certain amount of them every, I believe it's like 6 hours or 12 hours or something, but they are time locked. But you can stockpile 100 of them. Now in Shadowbringers, turns out people found a leave quest that was too efficient, way too good. That was the coffee biscuits. And they found out that a single leave quest could let you submit, I think it was 9 coffee biscuits for 3 times the reward. And all of a sudden you had a whole bunch of people all submitting a whole bunch of these to get a huge amount of coffee biscuits and rewards into the game. And it was unintentionally adding too much Gil to the economy. Right, so they just snipped that the button. They patched that out because if they left it in, it's like, yeah, that would have caused problems down the line. That would have caused inflation. So there's that going on. Now, talked a little bit about drains. Transfer is interesting because there's a tax on the market board, right? There's a sales tax, and that's both the transfer and the drain. Market board is just easier to use. You can technically trade directly to another player, right? And then you won't have to pay the market board tax, but that's a pain in the ass. So everyone just kind of agrees to do the market board tax. And that's kind of interesting because it's like, well, you've got this constant drain on the economy. Constant. And it also means that certain things like maps actually can drain at the same time they source. Right? At least in Dawnshire right now, we have something called Figmental Weapon Coffers. Really, really cool weapons from a design contest. They come from maps. They're really nice. A lot of people want them, so people sell them on the market board. And that market board tax is just drained out of the economy, right? That market board sales tax just gone. So that helps manage things. And there's interesting ways of looking at it as well. I tell people Island Sanctuary, from the actual global economy standpoint, it's a pure drain. It is a pure drain. Its entire existence and people using it will drain Gil out of the economy. Because you don't get any Gil from doing it, but you get a lot of things that you can sell on the market board to other people. And now this is what I want to get back to with is Gil Useless. Because more and more now, they're adding more and more interesting things to transfer between players. They started in Shadowbringers and Endwalker, where they said, hey, we're going to try doing Gil syncs. We're going to try the World of Warcraft method of, hey, let's add something that's really, really cool that people want and make it like 25 mil, 50 mil. Those are your gold mounts. Some of you probably already have some of them. I've got the Golden Namazu one. It's the best one. Don't at me. So it's like that kind of worked, but it didn't really work all that well. The other one that's been long-standing that also didn't really work all that well is housing, right? Housing is often referred to as like the big Gil investment. But you actually you get some of your Gil back if you ever abandon the house. And also it's kind of like a one done payment that you'll never really make again. Whereas developers want you to keep buying things, right? They want to keep having stuff that you want that is cool for Gil. So they started doing this now, where they're like, hey, let's make it so you can buy really good items from other players. And it started in Endwalker with everyone's favorite bicolor gemstones. So I'm Australian, so we spell color correctly here. And what happened here is there was a item you can get from this. Every 100 bicolor gemstones you get from doing fates, you could trade in and get a little ticket. You get, I believe, 100 of those tickets, or 500. Either way, it was a lot. And you can buy cool wings for your character, or a mount. But that's a lot. That's a lot of bicolor gemstones. It's not really worth grinding it yourself. But those tickets are market board tradable. So now you've got an interesting thing of, hey, you could grind this out yourself, but you can technically pay for other people's grind. And get it faster, or, you know, get it by doing something else. And that's has opened an interesting thing for the community now of they want to have more ways for the different groups to interact, right? If you are a pure crafter and you don't give a crap about doing fates, you could still get that fate mount because you've got the Gil. And the Gil is like a universal, well, I mean, it is a currency you can use to get things from other pieces of content now. Right. Then they expanded on Dawn Trail and they added a new one for Gathering. Right, I believe currently we've got 2 mounts that you can get from Gathering. We got the Ronique and the Barrel Tender, the big Giga Tender Cactua. So it's like, okay, gatherers have their own way of getting items now that they can trade to other players, and players who can buy them. Players who have no interest in gathering might still really like those mounts. They can get them now this way. And now we've kind of seen the circle complete where Chaotic came out, and Chaotic had a whole bunch of rewards in it. It had gear. It had 2 mounts. And it had a hairstyle. It also technically had a minion, but we won't talk about that. Now, the gear could be best in slot for people doing Savage. So that was pretty cool. Hey, you want to do Chaotic, you can get some really good gear upgrades. And that was locked to Chaotic. You have to do Chaotic to get that gear. You cannot buy the gear, you cannot transfer it afterwards. One of the mounts you have to get through doing Chaotic, right? That's the cool one that makes you look like a big smoke cloud. The only way to do that is to do Chaotic. The second mount, though, and the hairstyle, both of these could be traded on the market board. And both of them were quite expensive. So what happened is you have this system now where, hey, if you want to do Chaotic, and maybe you don't have an interest in this item, hey, you can sell it to other people, right? Maybe you're not interested in the hairstyle. You already like the one you've got. Sell it on the market board. For the people who don't like Chaotic and don't want to do that kind of content, you can still get that really cool item. You just have to buy it off the market board from others. And even further than that, let's say that someone's done a lot of Chaotic, and like in normal situations, they would have already gotten the gear that they want, right? They can still keep grinding it now because they get items that they can sell to others. There's a bonus incentive. Now, this was done earlier, technically, in a much poorer way, and the community really didn't like this, with Criterion. Criterion came out and they said, hey, we've got this mount. You need 100 tokens to buy it, or it can be a rare drop, and it's market board tradable. Now, Criterion's biggest problem, let's be honest, is the fact that it only really had the mount as a reward. Later on, it did add some good stuff to Alo, and you've got an interesting title. I think Epic Hero is a pretty cool title for doing all the Criterion Savages. But only having the one reward is what suffered, which is why you can look at now and what they've learnt from Chaotic, or what they've learnt from Chaotic in Criterion. Sorry, wrong way. What they've learnt from Criterion in Chaotic. Too many C's. They've got 2 mounts, and they've got far more rewards, right? And that's made people a lot happy about this. There's certain people who are still not happy that things are marketable tradable, but we can ignore them. So there's all this stuff now of like, okay, you can buy these things, you can do all this stuff. We're currently, at the time of this video, patch 7.2, Cosmic Exploration has not come out. Occult Crescent has not come out. However, I expect both of those things to have some kind of thing like this. I know that Cosmic Exploration will have new dyes. Just like the Firmament used to have new dyes, which is going to be great because that's how I've made a lot of Gil in the game, is just selling those really good dyes. Shout outs to Ruby Red and all the red mages who need to buy that constantly. It's like, this is the good stuff. You want people always wanting to buy things. You want people always wanting to trade things. And it's happening more and more now. And Gil's not useless. I mean, it never has been. But there's a certain point of like, yeah, if you got 100 million Gil, you don't really have any need to spend things on. Or you'll never run out of it. That's too much. But these days, it's like, whoa, shit, the hairstyle from Chaotic could go for like 30 mil. That's a big investment. The Figmental Weapons coffers, I was legitimately there going, I cannot actually afford to buy all these for every job. They were selling for like 15 mil each. Luckily, it's gone down now because they've increased the drop rate. It's still like 4 million for a weapon. But you see, add some more larger scale things in. Add some stuff where it's like, hey, if you don't do this content, you can still get some things out of it through using Gil. I think that's a really good system. And they've done all this while still keeping the game away from the inflation problems that World of Warcraft has had. Anyway, that's just a little quick video that I wanted to make about this because I keep getting asked that question of like, hey, is Gil useless in this game? Right, or Gil is useless. And I want to talk about this and how got some interesting things. There's always really interesting things about the game that is like designed that people don't even notice, right? Like now you can go in and you can see whenever the game has any kind of large Gil reward, you will always notice that it's tied to a lockout. It's tied to some kind of timed lockout. So yeah. Anyway, thank you all for watching. My name is Edrem. You can catch me live over on twitch.tv/Edrem, where I normally chat about these things while playing Final Fantasy. Alright, goodbye.